time to play at a third time. So let's stop focusing on the great game. Let's focus on the great play. Let's play with passion, let's play with love, let's play with responsibility, let's play with respect for one another.
How you feel? How you feel?
Morning. I don't want you to focus on, because if I ask you right now, do you want to have a great game? All y'all will say yes, right? I want you to focus on, I want to have a great play. I want to have a great play. Then the next play, I want to have.
What is up? We are back with another segment of HBCU football, and it's week 3. It's been a lot crazy going on in the world of HBCU football, SWAC, and MEAC in general, just HBCUs in general. But the one that I want to kick off, since we weren't able to record last week, is the Grambling versus Ohio State game. We spoke a lot about it, hyping it up, and unfortunately, Grambling lost 70-0. Michael, just what are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I wasn't really surprised with the score. I will say that for the most part. And I'm not saying that. I'm saying that because you have to understand that when you're playing against one of the top Big Ten teams in college football, not saying that Grambling did not have the physicality to play with them, but you have to understand that both of these teams come from a different playing level. And I think what people are confusing the matter is, there've been a lot of comments about, oh, Grambling sucks, Grambling, will never be anything like Ohio State. You have to understand that this is an HBCU. This isn't, Ohio State. Grambling, their greatness is a lot different from Ohio State. And I think what people really need to understand the history of HBCUs before you just go talking about Grambling, what they can't conquer and what they be. Besides the fact, you gotta understand, Grambling is one of the top HBCUs in college football, and that's history standpoint. And I think people are not understanding and respecting HBCUs, and the Ohio State game proved that. There are some people that respected Grambling, and I respect a lot of Ohio State fans because they gave the band a huge respect. I've seen clips of even the Ohio State band knew that Grambling band was legit. They knew that because they knew that this is an HBCU. They're a whole lot different from us. But if you just look at the faces of the Ohio State band and the crowd itself, the world fame sounded good. And a lot of people, this was a scrimmage game for Ohio State, if you think about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this like really quick. I told a lot of people this. Ohio State just came off being the national champions. They are the best team in the country. You
Right.
put that against a small HBCU in Louisiana. What do you expect? And yes, we may have not. We didn't expect a 70-0 blowout, but it was kind of on par of what we expected. That it wasn't going to be a fair game.
Yeah.
And you just got to understand, after thinking about it, the more and more I really don't like that these HBCUs schedule against these bigger schools, because it makes people take away the respect that these HBCUs have.
Right.
But back then HBCUs were in their dominance, because the HBCUs were created for these black players and these black students that couldn't go to these PWIs. And eventually, when they finally integrated, the PWI started to take all the talented players and they started to want to go to these bigger name schools. Hence why these HBCUs don't have the talent size compared to what they used to have back then. So I think a lot of people should note that, like I said, back then, HBCUs, the reason that they were so dominant and could compete with these other PWI schools is because back then they were segregated. Black players couldn't go to these PWIs, and all of a sudden, when they desegregate and these top black players are starting to go to the bigger schools, this is what happens years later. You see the big skill drop off, and that just goes for in general. That just goes for your FCS schools and your FBS schools.
Yeah.
There's going to be no way that these teams are going to be able to compete. And yes, sometimes there's been times where Grambling has came close to being a top PWI. Arizona a couple years ago, Grambling almost beat them, and they should have beat them.
Yeah.
But But I always say this: you got to put your respect on Grambling because Grambling has a lot of history and a
Yep.
lot of players. There's more players in the Hall of Fame and a lot of players from Grambling that have went to the NFL that you got to think about, and
Yep.
it's a lot from other HBCUs.
Exactly. And like I said, I'm not saying that Grambling did not play up to the hype with Ohio State because they did.
They
Okay.
showed in the first half. They showed that they had that heart. They wanted to go out there and compete, but the talent just the gap was unfair, and you could see after halftime, it looked like they just gave up, and they just knew like we have no chance.
Yeah. But a lot of people were questioning Mickey Joseph's comment in the press conference that he made that we knew it was going to happen. You have to understand that Mickey Joseph was literally speaking from the heart. He knew what his players were going into. And a lot of people, and I even talked to my dad about this, he was like, what kind of coach would say something like that? And he playing against a Power 5 school. You have to understand, I would have said the same thing because of the fact of the matter is you're playing a Power 5 school. Not saying that Grambling, first of all, I think Grambling played extremely well. They stuck with them. They did what they could. You have to understand that the physicality and the game speed of how HBCU teams play compared to Ohio State is completely different. And not Grambling, they're not trash, but of course people are gonna say that because they don't know nothing about HBCUs. And I think
And
what people need to start doing is do your research on HBCUs before your team or school, whoever plays you, and then you be like, oh, they weren't
and
nothing.
I mean, and I looked in the comments. I would read the comments, and I'm like, it could like when a lot of people say, "Oh, they just lost 70-0." I was just like, you really don't understand, the skill level and the gap between these HBCUs. Because any
Right,
HBCU that I've seen this year that goes up against a top Power 5 school, they don't come away with the win. And it's a bad blow, but they come back to conference play and they do amazing. I can just
right.
name Alcorn, Southern. I could go on and on for days. Isn't that just Grambling that got beat bad? UAPB. All these HBCUs went against these Power 4, Power 5, whatever you want to call it, schools, and they got beat bad. But what I will say on the positive side is it allowed these players to showcase their talents on a bigger stage. And it allowed them to get that exposure on the bigger stage, to get that feeling. And hey, Grambling may have not won, but they came away with $2 million, I believe.
Yeah,
And that's going to renovations to get a new indoor facility. Stuff to make the athletic program better.
yeah. And sometimes that's what you have to look at. And like I said, I give total credit to Grambling because not only, like I said, did they play with Ohio State, there were times Grambling got turnovers. There were times the offense. I looked at the clip. The offense was actually moving. It was just you're playing
Ohio
against.
State they're just better, and they
Yeah,
Grambling just couldn't score on that.
yeah. You have to understand that. And I think, like I said, like you said, dudes, people need to understand the history of HBCUs and what's different between both schools. And I think when people start to understand it, they'll see that regardless of these big games, you gotta understand the big games don't compare to the conference games
Hmm.
because even though Grambling, like I said, lost against Ohio State, it was expected. But at the same time, that doesn't take away the physicality and the strength and the talent they have on this team. Like you have to understand that. But like I said, I give huge credit to Grambling, regardless of what the score was. Yeah, it
And
was 7.
I wasn't, I was a little disappointed, but I wasn't mad or anything. I was just
Yeah,
like, these boys, they came out, they showed that they had the heart, they wanted to compete. But
yep,
like I said, the skill level it was just different. It's not fair. And it was sad that Grambling had to play literally the number one team in the country. You're national reigning champs. It, but Grambling, they showed they had the heart in them. The players that wanted it, they went out there and they played. They gave it to the best of their ability. And like I said before, it looked like at halftime they kind of just realized like it's not gonna go much better for any of us. Because I mean, Michael, I told you during the game, I expected them to score more up to halftime, but at halftime it was like 28-0. You would have expected a little bit more from Ohio State at half. And yes, Ohio State finally put the belt on them in the second half, But Grambling went out there in the first half and showed that they had the heart and they wanted to compete, and that's ultimately what matters. They didn't go out there, they didn't make excuses. They played to the best of their ability.
Yep, absolutely.
And I'm not disappointed with them. But jumping into our next topic, Grambling versus Kentucky State. Now, this is where I have my little concerns because I don't know if it was they were still beat from the Ohio State, or was it just they didn't take this school seriously? Kentucky State University is a D2 school. And I
Yep.
think I want to give the excuse that Grambling was just saying, hey, okay, this is going to be an easy week. And like you said, this was a trap game for them. And Kentucky State came out to play and they almost beat Grambling. And in my opinion, Grambling got really, really lucky that they came away with this win. But I mean, the first half, Grambling, they showed like, hey, I'm gonna say this. First half, Grambling, they showed some inconsistencies, but I mean, towards the end of the first half, they started to pick it up. Um, quarterback, Kazavion T-Set, or however you say it. Yeah, Gremlin's quarterback T-Set. Um, even though he did have, a little bit of a rough performance, he picked it up. And I mean, this is what I mean. He made the big plays when needed. In the fourth quarter, when down by a touchdown, he was able to go down the field and score the game-winning touchdown. He
Yep.
showed that he wanted to win this game. And this defense stepped up when it ultimately mattered. The defense stepped up.
Yep.
But I mean, Michael, I told you, I've been impressed with Gremlin's quarterback because although he is a transfer from Southern, I believe, I have told you I'm impressed with Gremlin starting QB. He shows that he has the heart and the dog to fight, and he shows that he wants to win. And shows when he wants to get it done when it matters. And this was proven in the Kentucky State game. And like honestly, I want him to stay as the starting quarterback, for the rest of the season because I think he can get it done. I know he can get it done with these. I'm not even gonna say think. I know he can get it done with these against these other teams. And Grambling has showed at times they can be a real lethal threat. Their wide receivers look on point, the running backs look on point, and the defense looks on point at times. And yes, the defense did have some inconsistencies against KSU, which ultimately almost lost them the game. But like I said before, the defense showed up when it mattered. In overtime, they got that return fumble and took it to the house for a touchdown. They didn't give up. They fought to the end of the whistle. Now, I keep saying this. I wasn't too impressed that they had. It was too close of a game with this Kentucky State. I told you before, Michael, I believe that Grambling should have came in and put a belt to them like they did Langston. But they didn't, but they still came away with the win. So I am not going to try to harp on that too much because, Grambling is only 1 week out of, or 2 weeks out of playing Prairie View in their first conference game. And if they win this game against Texas A&M Commerce, they can go into conference play 3-1 and just keep the train rolling from there. And I mean, Mickey Joseph has already showed, the errors that he's fixed from last year on the offensive side of the ball and on the defensive side of the ball.
Right. Yeah. And, like we spoke before, dudes, if Grambling can win 3 out of these 4 games, then, they got East Texas Commerce just coming up Saturday. If Grambling can win this game against East Texas Commerce, I highly believe that Grambling will be coming in hot in conference play. But I'm not going to really touch too much on that, but I will talk about the game against Kentucky State. So, Deuce, I told you that Kentucky State proved that we are not Langston. Even though D1, D2, wherever level they play at, Kentucky State proved that we are going to come in and give you a competition, regardless of what conference we play in. You got to understand, we do have the offense, and yes, we do have the defense. Now, Grambling defense, Kentucky State proved that we have playmakers on our side of the ball. Don't get it twisted, because there were times that Kentucky State had Grambling defense beat.
Yes, a lot of times. And even on the special team side of the ball, Michael, Kentucky, they showed even on the special teams that Grambling can screw up, and they got a costly. Grambling gave a costly turnover due to special teams, and I keep saying this. There was 2 special teams errors that I could point out that gave Kentucky State a lot of momentum to keep pushing forward to win, and that gave them good field position to keep scoring. Yes, Grambling did have their shots and their times where they were moving the ball, but when they would stall out, Kentucky State would go score, and then when Kentucky State would kick the ball back off, Grambling would turn it over, and Kentucky State would get amazing field position and go on and score. That is what dug Grambling in a deeper hole that they already were in.
Kentucky State, I mean, you literally just said it. Kentucky State took care of the opportunity when it presented to them. I mean, Kentucky State found creases within the Grambling State special teams. They found creases within Grambling defense, the secondary. Because, like I said, there were times Langston was picking on Grambling's secondary. Even the commentator of the game was basically saying that Kentucky State was picking on Grambling's secondary, and not saying that Grambling wasn't picking back up. But you gotta understand, like I said, dudes, there were times Kentucky State was confusing Grambling with the motions that they were bringing. It was so many different motions that they had, and they kind of had Grambling beat. But then the second half, Grambling started to pick up a little bit more on that. But at the same time, if I'm Grambling, you gotta fix those creases, because there are gonna be times you ain't gonna pull out games like you did against.
And Grambling got really lucky that they won, Michael. I told you Grambling shouldn't have won that game. Grambling should have won that game, and they just got really lucky that with enough time, Grambling was able to go down the field and score, and really score. Like they scored with 10 seconds left, and they got lucky. They got lucky that defense turnover in overtime and won them the game. I told you this, Michael. I didn't think that Grambling should have won that game. As much as I want to support my school, that wasn't Grambling's game to win, and they got lucky by the grace of God and the fight that they had in them that they were able to win.
Yep.
But I hope they take this as a note going into Texas A&M Commerce, because this is another small school that we cannot sleep. We cannot slack off. We have to keep putting the same work for every team, no matter D2, D1, D2, D1, Ohio State, any school. We got to give the same amount of energy for each school. We can't be content with just saying, oh, hey, this is a smaller school. We don't have to really worry about them.
Right, exactly. And it's just like I said, Grambling has to find better ways to pull games out. Like I said, there are going to be teams, especially in conference play, like Kentucky State, that are going to bring the competition to Grambling. And like I told you, Deuce, it's all about how Grambling responds to that competition, regardless of where you go or where you play. It do not matter what team you play. I can care less if it was Kentucky State. Heck, I can care less if Grambling played Tech again. It doesn't matter. The point of the matter is, wherever destination you go to, it is responsibility as a player and coaching staff to make sure that your players are mentally focused and not overlooking this team, because you could tell a team, don't overlook them. Saying and these players' mind is 2 different things. These players have to understand that teams like Kentucky State are not going to go down lightly. And when that game went overtime, dudes, like you said, Grambling should have won this game. And I believe you. T-Set basically showed that he has the quarterback potential, the quarterback mobility, the quarterback accuracy. This guy is starting quarterback potential. And even the backup quarterback, I can't think of his name right now, but he even has potential. Both of these quarterbacks, the competition kind of between those two. But
those 2 quarterbacks, T-Set is a quarterback. I'm telling you, he shows that he has the heart to win. He shows that he wants to win. He shows that he's going to put the team on his back and get it done. And honestly, he is my player of the game just because of what he did in that 4th quarter. Just because he put his body on the line to go and win that game.
Yep. You know who he remind me of? He remind me of Devontae Kincaid, because Devontae Kincaid did the exact same thing when he was a quarterback. Running when he know he needs to. Throwing when he knows he did. The guy T-Set has accuracy, and I think T-Set is going to become a problem, especially in conference play. But also, I will say this, dudes, Grambling offense, I understand. You got a great depth at the running back position. I am not taking away from that, but you got to use your receivers a whole lot more.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned the receivers because there was two that stood out to me: Keith Jones and Tyson George. Yes, they didn't go over 100 yards, but they both did score a touchdown. But I feel like Gremlin could have used them a little bit more than what they did, because these two receivers are the two receivers that stand out to me that say, okay, we can be our top two receivers on the team when we need to get it done. But they got to give them the ball more. Give them the ball more. Give them the ball more.
Yep, and that's exactly what I'm saying. First of all, I love what Mickey Joseph has done with this Grambling offense. I love it. First of all, what people are not talking about is the Grambling offensive line. Dude, through the first 3 games, they only gave up 2 sacks, my guy. 2 sacks.
It's amazing.
Offensive line is legit. I'm telling you, those guys are doing their jobs. They're creating holes for the running backs. They're giving T-Set time, even when they're blitzing. T-Set had it, but T-Set, he's a smart quarterback, because when the blitz is coming at you, dudes, he didn't wait. He took off because he knew that as a quarterback, you can't always depend on your offensive line to cover blitzes. And T-Set did that. T-Set spread the ball downfield. I'm saying, if Grambling would just use their receivers just a little bit more like they use their running backs, Grambling offense can become a problem. I'm telling you.
Yes. And I mean, I have not been this excited since, Devontae Kincaid was quarterback, since Chad Williams was wide receiver. It's been a while since I've been excited. And the fact that I'm really getting to understand these players have a lot to them than more than meets the eye. These players are showing that they're willing to put their bodies, the physicality on the line when it needs to be done.
Exactly. And they're proving time and time again that we have the capability of going up and getting the ball when we need to. We have the capability of extending the play when we need to. Because I'm gonna tell you this right now, there were times in that game, Deuce, these receivers were catching the ball, and and at a competitive level. Like it was one play where I can't think of the receiver name, but he went up and grabbed it with one hand, even though he had a whole lot of, even the Kentucky State player had a whole lot of jerseys. He went up and snagged it. That's what I'm saying. When you have to trust your receivers a whole lot more to have them go up and get it. There's nothing wrong with running the ball, but as you saw, Kentucky State was feeding on that running game. And there were times Grambling offense was not staying on the field because their running game was not being effective. And I will say this, Deuce, the receivers, they do need to do a little bit better of catching ball, because there were some drop passes in that game, and there was also some miscommunication. So the communication needs to be a little bit better, but that does not take away that Grambling has the potential of becoming a dominant offense. And I think, excuse me, if Grambling can continue to do what they've done in the first 3 games, I think Grambling can become a problem in SWAC conference play.
Yeah, but jumping into our next topic, I don't know if I want to start with ASU or Jackson State first, because these two teams look like the top teams that are going to be coming out the SWAC West. Let's start with Jackson State. They won 30-0 against Tuskegee. We know Tuskegee is a smaller school, but Jackson State proved that the offense is dominant. The defense is still as dominant as last year. Jackson State wasn't even playing with their starting quarterback. They were playing with the backup. And, he went 14 for 20, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 2 rushing touchdowns. So he had 3 touchdowns in total. And not to mention, like I said, running back Ahmad Miller, 8 carries for 9 yards. Yes, he didn't clip 800, but he still looks like a very running back that can be a threat in the backfield. Honestly, I've been looking at Jackson State this year and their defense and their offense, and I'm not going to lie, from quarterback play to special teams, there will be a true tough fight just in the SWAC in general. Yeah. That team is good, Michael, and we said this before. They have a chance to go back to back, Michael. If they have a very strong chance to go back to back. And this is the only competition I really see right now that's a strong competition is Alabama State. And we're going to talk about Alabama State in a minute. But Jackson State has a very strong case. Just even though they haven't played no SWAC teams yet, they have a very strong case to go out, win the SWAC West, and even win the SWAC again. And I hate to say that, but this team is lethal.
Yeah, this team, Jackson State, has always been lethal, especially when, Deion Sanders was there. And a lot of people, after Deion left, will Jackson State go back to the old ways, or will they continue down?
And they continue to dominate.
The dominance. And it all starts with, Jerry Lockhart's performance. This is a freshman quarterback who had
a true freshman at that.
Yes. He had a stellar debut, throwing for a touchdown and rushing for 2 more, showcasing his potential. Deuce, the quarterbacks at Jackson State, especially Jerry Lockhart himself, there is a bright future.
It's because that's not even their starter. He's not even their starter. But he basically showed what all coaches always say, Deuce, next man up mentality. He proved that in that game just against Tuskegee. He proved that. Jackson State, you gotta understand, when you play in Jackson State at Jackson State, it's not gonna be an easy fight. It's not
easy at all. And don't get me wrong, you gotta give credit to Tuskegee. They did what they needed to do. But you gotta understand, Jackson State had just way more firepower on both sides of the ball than what Tuskegee had. Not saying Tuskegee, I'm not saying Tuskegee is hard. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that Jackson State has proven time and time again over the past consecutive seasons, that we are in control of ourselves, and that we have the offense and the defense to continue to bring the fight to you. So you gotta understand that Jackson State is not a team you're gonna sleep on. I mean, if you think back to when they played Southern Miss, they gave Southern Miss competition. And I mean, Jackson State is just that team. They're just that team, and they are going to win their division. And not only that, they are probably going to get home field advantage in the SWAC again, because you have to understand this Jackson State team, they're not trash. I'm sorry.
They're really
not. They have depth. They have the coaching staff, and I'm gonna tell you this right now, Jackson State, it ain't gonna be the same team Grambling played last year. I'm telling you that now.
Grambling got really lucky that Jackson State just had offensive inconsistencies last year. Grambling got lucky that they beat Jackson State last year, and Grambling just got lucky that Jackson State had so many turnovers last year. Jackson State, they fixed everything this season. It looks like this. It's the same team with the new mindset and a new mentality going into.
Yep, with a new mindset and a new mentality. And I'm telling you this right now: if Grambling don't fix some of the problems that they had, especially
it's gonna be a long game. It's gonna be a long game
for Grambling. I'm gonna tell you that right now, because Jackson State, they got their foot on the gas and they ain't stopping. They ain't, to be honest, they ain't been stopped. They kept going, and it's gonna get even more and more dangerous if teams don't prepare and get ready for Jackson State. Because, like you said, Deuce, the only team that has the capability of being competitive against them is Alabama State. And, like I said, Alabama State gonna give Jackson State a game. I actually believe it. And,
Alabama, and we're gonna talk about Alabama State in a minute. And I mean, normally Alabama State is that bottom feeder team in the SWAC. Alabama State didn't turn a lot of people's heads. But before we talk about them, I do want to mention wide receiver Kobe Paul. 5 receptions, 113 yards. That is another receiver on the Jackson State offense that brings that fire and that electricity to that offense. That offense, I don't know, it's just like a well-oiled machine. Yep. Every side, from running back to the blocking to the quarterback play to the receiving play, everything is clicking. It's clicking and it's working for them in their best favor.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jackson State, they have the running backs, they have the receivers, They have the quarterbacks. So if you think just because one player is going to be out, you are sadly mistaken that Jackson State don't have depth, because they got depth. And they got depth at every position. I don't care. Heck, they even got depth at the kicking position. So, don't get it twisted, because Jackson State is in control of the SWAC right now. Jackson State is in control of their own destiny. And I'm just going to call it right now. Jackson State, if they continue to play like they play against Southern Miss and Tuskegee, it's going to be a long
Hampton. And Hampton, too.
Oh, yeah, Hampton. I forgot all about that. Hampton, too. Jackson State is not stopping. Jackson State, you're gonna have to do whatever you can, especially against that defense. You're not gonna get too many flashy plays on that defense. I'm gonna tell you that right now, because they got a balanced defensive line, they got a balanced defensive secondary. You're not going to do what you want to do against Jackson State. It's not gonna happen. So I'm gonna tell you this right now. Again, Jackson State is going to win their conference. Their division, and then plus they're gonna win the SWAC again this year, unless Alabama State or maybe Grambling. I'm gonna say maybe Grambling, because Grambling do have the capabilities, but it's more of really Alabama State than Grambling right now. So the real question here is, who can match up with Jackson State, and who can give Jackson State another loss in their column, and also a conference? That's what I have to think about. Who has the capability of upsetting Jackson State? That's what we have to look at the end of the day.
Yeah, and like I said, it's going to be a long season. I think Jackson State has it in them to win. But Alabama State, Andrew Body, best quarterback in the SWAC right now.
Obviously.
14 for 16, 251 yards, 4 touchdowns. Amazing. Incredible. He is the focal point of that offense. He is the reason that they're winning these games. We keep saying Alabama State should have beat UAB. They should have beat them. And they got by this quarterback, Andrew Body. Honestly, it's like he came out of nowhere. He's got the whole SWAC on notice, and he's putting his team really on his back. Not even really on his back, because everybody's doing their job, but he is leading this team. He's leading this team to these wins. He's doing amazing, and he's not really playing bad quarterback ball. And we see inconsistencies with some quarterbacks. Like every school has some quarterback that show their inconsistency, but him, it's hard to point out his flaws. He's an amazing quarterback, and I feel like every week we just got to give him his praise, because what he's doing. The fact that he was only throw 2 incompletions, still throw 4 touchdowns and over 200 yards is incredible.
Yeah, he is basically showing. Everybody's basically showing that he is a quarterback that not only Alabama State can trust, but what Eddie Robinson can trust. Because at the same time, you have to understand that Andrew Body is a talented quarterback. He has the capabilities of what it takes to be a quarterback, not only in the HBCU, but in the SWAC in general. And it's not going to stop from there. And it's not just Andrew Body. It's Alabama State in general. You have to understand. It's giving. Look at the offense for strong offensive production. Hold on, here it is, dude. The Hornets offense has been a major strength in scoring a conference best 72 points through the first 2 games of the 2025 season. So it's not just Andrew Body, it's the whole offense in itself. So, like we were just saying, if Alabama State offense can continue its dominance, they can be the front runner to compete with Jackson State when that time happens. And if Andrew Body can continue to play at the high level quarterback that he is at right now, he is going to be a major problem for Jackson State in just that conference. I think they're in the East or the West
They're in
Conference.
the West. Same with Jackson State. Them two will be the two competitors for that division.
I'm telling y'all, Andrew Body and Alabama State are the front runner-ups in that division in general to compete with Jackson State and possibly give Jackson State not only a conference loss, but just a loss in general in that loss column. So if the team chemistry can continue to improve, Alabama State, and I even wrote this down, Alabama State can be contenders in the SWAC this year without a doubt. Without a doubt. Because Andrew Body is proving I'm him. I am him. So Alabama State, if you look at the history, Alabama State has been slept on in the SWAC for years. Alabama State was basically in the position where Grambling was in the past consecutive season. A lot of people didn't used to look at Alabama State as a team hard to beat. Even Grambling people back then, and I know this back then because I grew up watching Grambling. I grew up watching teams like Alabama State. Not saying that Alabama State was not sorry back then, but what I'm saying is that people did not look at Alabama State as tough contenders because of the fact that Alabama State was in a hard spot, was in a real struggling spot. But I believe that not only is this the year that Alabama State can shock the world and be like, we've been put down for so long, now we're up and we're going to stay up. Yes, because of guys like Andrew Body himself, because he's a leader on that offense.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, Alabama State is that team to not sleep on. And a lot of commentators and a lot of you, if you look at the power rankings, they got Alabama State in the top 10 because they are that team. They are that team. And you have to understand that Alabama State is not the same Alabama State that I grew up watching. Alabama State is not the same Alabama State that people stay talking about. That they have no competition. There are times Grambling used to play Alabama State in their homecoming, Deuce. So you in Alabama State, this ain't the same Alabama State we all know. This is Alabama State that could be possibly the team to not only beat Jackson State, but could possibly be the team to win the SWAC East or West. That's what we have to look at. And Andrew Body, I'm going to say this respectfully, Andrew Body could be an NFL draft prospect.
Yeah, and you know the fact that it's one thing that ASU has that some of these other SWAC teams don't have is that they've actually played another SWAC school. Alabama State went in there and beat Southern on their own home field, if I believe. If I'm wrong, y'all if I'm wrong, y'all can correct me. But the fact that they were able to do that goes to show that this team is already a threat. And yes, Southern may not have the best record right now, but Southern is still a dominant team in the SWAC, whether you like it or not.
There it is. There it is. That I was just going to say that. Regardless of what happened to Southern at Southern, it does not take away that Southern is not still that team that could potentially be a threat. Because in my eyes, they still are. Regardless of what happened, yes, even though they got beat 37 in Alabama State, but you gotta understand, like I said, Alabama State is proving that they are that team. And they went to Southern, and I'm gonna say this too. It's not easy to be Southern at Southern. It ain't. But the fact that Alabama State was able to cause Southern to struggle in front of their own crowd, that shows once again that Alabama State is not that team that sleep on anymore. Not saying that, you know, that they have not been good in the past second season, but you have to understand Alabama State has really struggled, and they have. But when it takes guys like Andrew Body to pick up a team, but it also comes down to the players around him. And that's why I said the offensive performance. The offense has picked up around Andrew Body to become a dangerous offense. Like T said with Grambling, the offense in general has picked up because of the fact that T said is not doing it alone. It takes a whole offense to become a dominant offense. It's not just the quarterbacks. You have to understand, once again, that what happened with Southern does not take away that Southern cannot come back up because it's still early in the season. You have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand that just because a team gets beat badly at home does not mean that that's not the turning point of that. We will never get beat like that again. It takes a team to respond to how they lost. And Grambling, even though they struggled against Kentucky State, they proved that they have the competitive level to win a game in the trenches. With an ugly win, sometimes you have to win ugly to win, dude. That's just part of football. That's just part of football, baby. Sometimes you have to win ugly to win. It ain't going to be handed to you every time. So the fact that Grambling, Jackson State, Alabama State, the fact that these schools got the wins in easy or hard fashion, that is the rule of the ball game. You're going to win ugly sometimes, and you're going to win easy sometimes. But it all depends on how that team that's coming to you performs. That's just the bottom line. And like I said, and I'm ending it with this. Alabama State is that team to compete with Jackson State and possibly switch places with Jackson State and be the winner of that division and possibly even maybe have a home field advantage in the SWAC championship, without a doubt. And Andrew Body has the potential of becoming a NFL prospect franchise quarterback.
And look, Jackson State, Alabama State, when they two face off, that'll be a game that we most definitely will have to cover because I know that it's going to go down. It's going to go down as a good one.
Oh, yeah.
This is the first. I said this. I keep saying this. This is the first time that I've been watching HBCU football that Alabama State is normally, like a threat, and we haven't even got a conference play yet. I always talk down on. I hate to say, I always talk down on Alabama State and Alabama A&M. They're always like these two bottom feeders, in the SWAC. There's other teams like Mississippi Valley, UAPB with them. This team, in my eyes, for the first time, it looks truly dominant. Just truly dominant. And I hate to say it for Jackson State fans, but we said that Jackson State is going to make the championship. That's our prediction. But we could very much be wrong with Alabama State. They have a strong case to make it.
Yeah, it just depends on how they play, Jackson State, when that time comes. It's going to take one winner. Will ASU fall? And will Andrew Body struggle? Or will Jackson State struggle and Alabama State take the victory? It's just all going to determine how both of these teams play when that time comes. And I'm ready for it.
Me too, Michael. What is your thoughts on, Michael Vick and DeSean Jackson?
Honestly, I'm going to say this, and I wrote this down. Michael Vick's coaching at Norfolk State is still very early in his first season. But his team secured his first win in overtime on September 6, 2025 against Virginia State after an initial tough loss in his debut. The hiring has seemed to have brought in a transformational move for the program with Michael Vick experience, relief, excitement. It's bringing a lot of young players and recruit in his native Hampton Roads. So basically, you have to understand that Michael Vick's coaching is bringing experience to the HBCU, kind of like what Deion Sanders did against, kind of what Deion Sanders did with Jackson State. And this is kind of what I've been talking about in the previous episodes. that what most HBCU teams are starting to pick up on is that these Hall of Fame players are bringing in experience to these players, bringing in, history, bringing in the rules of the game. And it's not just the name that you have to look at. It's what the name can bring. And, I'm all for, what Michael Vick and DeSean Jackson have been doing at both these HBCUs because, one, this is big for HBCUs. And I think that Michael Vick can continue to bring this HBCU program, Norfolk State, to a high level and could possibly become a dangerous team. But it's all going to determine with his coaching, with his playing experience. Even though, yes, this is his first time as a head coach, but you have to understand that Michael Vick is going to grow. This is only his first season, right? This is only DeSean Jackson's first season. So it could go one or two ways. It could be a struggle, or it could be his first successful season. But it's kind of like with Deion Sanders when he first started Jackson State. It wasn't a successful season. It was a struggle. But in that second season, that's when Jackson State started to pick up. Then it started to pick up, and they became more and more dangerous. So you kind of just have to get the conference experience, get the coaching experience to like, okay, let me get an understanding of the conference. Let me get an understanding of where this team is at, and are we headed in the right direction, or do I need to pick up on some things, starting with the transfer portal, starting with the recruiting. It's just going to determine those two things. And I think Michael Vick is going to have a decent season. I think DeSean Jackson is going to have a decent season because at the same time, this is their first season. Not saying that the team does not have a capability, but you also have to understand is that it's all going to determine how these players perform game in and game out, and I feel like if the players can continue to compete like they are competing right now, because I think both schools are 2-1 right now. So it's just going to determine, Deuce, where is this team heading? And this first season is going to determine that. Just
And I mean,
Jackson State.
Yeah, I mean, like before we close this out, I got so much confidence in these two head coaches. I feel like they can make the same impact that Deion did. It may take a little bit, but I believe that, I believe that is surely what happened. You said both these teams are 2-1. It's hard for new incoming coaches to really have good records. And the fact that these two coaches are over 500 shows a lot.
Yeah. And it like I said, it's just a process. It's a process with these coaches. Like I said, especially these Hall of Fame coaches, because when you come into a new conference, in reality, you're normally 9 out of 10, your first season doesn't always go well because you're getting the experience of how the conference works, how things work in conference play. And like I said, it's kind of like I said, I mean, keep using the Deion Sanders example, because in his first year, I think Jackson State went 4-8, and then in that second season, they only lost one game. That's what it's just the experience at hand. And this is a process for Norfolk State. This is a process for Delaware State. This first season, they are going to make some for sure. Because this is Michael Vick and this is DeSean Jackson. These guys both have the knowledge to become a head coach. Not without a doubt. But like I said, this first season, it's a process for both schools. But it's all going to determine how that process goes. Will it be a long-term process or will it be a short-term process? Like with Jackson State, it was a short-term process because Deion Sanders dominated in his first offseason as Jackson State head coach. So it's really going to determine, like I said, how will the process go this year? Will the process go in a winning way for for Michael Vick and DeSean Jackson, or will it go in a losing way? And that's okay, because like I said, in the first season as a head coach, you're not always going to have a winning season. It just really determines on where the team is at before you came. And like I said, this season is going to determine for both guys, where is this team at before I came, and what do I need to do in my first off season as a head coach? What do I need to pick up on that this team struggled before I came? That's what you have to look at in reality, man.
And you summed it up perfectly. But just wrapping up this HBCU segment, me and Michael try to do this every week. We aren't the best, but
Yep.
we try to get it out to you as much. As always, a lot of y'all's views. We've been getting a lot of views from these HBCU videos. We enjoy the support. Keep doing that. Share it to y'all's friends, family, and everybody. Because, like we said before, we want to bring more exposure to these HBCU communities. But as always, it is love from our two co-hosts, me and Michael, and then Adam and Benji as well from Inside the Locker Room.
Absolutely.
As always, I say this always: stay safe and just basically enjoy life, because life don't take it for granted. But
without a doubt,
don't enjoy it. Enjoy our content. Enjoy everything that we post out, and we keep thanking y'all for the support. As always, it's love from Inside the Locker Room, and tune in for our next episode next week.
Thank y'all.